I posed 5 questions, and we're going to try to tackle those together and then come to a conclusion together. But I want to create some discussion to start. So first question is, for what purpose did Yahweh deliver the Israelites from Egypt? For what purpose did Yahweh deliver the Israelites from Egypt? And some of you more learned guys, how about bowing out and let some of the other folks weigh in until either we're struggling or we're barely afloat?
All right, so Steve and I had a discussion on this, and his answer is going to be much better than my answer. Because we talked about this, and I liked his answer better. But I mean, my original, well, I did. But my original thought was to deliver them from slavery and basically to show the Egyptians who the true God was, because they always looked at Pharaoh as being God.
Now, is that your answer or is that Steve's answer?
That was kind of my answer. Steve's answer was much better than mine.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you right now, probably off the bat, I think I'm going to hate Steve because he's probably going to jump to the core of the answer. But you know what's wonderful about your answer, Sarah, is a lot of us longtime Bible readers absolutely would land where you just did. That's that, and probably another social justice orientation would be where a lot of us longtime Bible readers would land. So when you then decided to cheat off of your husband's paper or to do your homework together, what wound up being the differentiation with Steve's answer?
Okay, so you need to talk now. Please talk, Steve.
Because I don't want Steve to ruin it all for us.
I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to ruin this.
Was it God's timing? God's timing, right? He told Abraham what he was going to make him.
And that was for Steve.
And
I can answer that question with one word: his.
Yeah. But I mean, when I started looking into this, I thought it was so fascinating because, one person said, well, there were so many reasons why now and why he got put there. And I was interested to see what he was going to say. So his points were the promised land. He was waiting to make sure that these people, there was no residual coming back from their godlessness, let's say. That Abraham's seed need to grow. He needed to become a nation. So being in captivity gave them a chance to be in one place, not scattered like the nomads they were, and to grow in numbers. And then the third thing was, of course, the answer to prophecy, because he told Abraham he was going to do it, right? Yep. But those were the big things that he hit on.
Yeah, and it's, again, I appreciate, Steve's next to you, and he's doing that. I got something to say, but I'm not going to say it. And I appreciate it because your answer, Di, is another one that's wonderfully thought out. And in fact, I was going to add one of the other elements is that it fulfills prophecy that Yahweh God had given to Jacob, Joseph, eons ago, right? So it's fulfillment of God's prophecy. And your answer combined with Sarah is the right church people answer. And I'm telling you, you can't. I don't know if you can see Steve on the camera. I'm watching Steve, and Steve is looking like one of those cartoons where he's swallowed something, but he's locked his mouth, and he can't open it. His mouth is locked. And I say this to you because, folks, as often as I watch the documentary that stars Moses as Charlton Heston. Presenting this account, it still misses the boat. As familiar as Christians are with this account, we miss the boat on the thing that Steve is shaking his head about right now. So
yeah, she's trying to entice them to.
Yeah. So some of you other folks who went fishing with this question last night. And by the way, the first 2 answers are great answers. They are great answers. How about somebody else?
So one of the things that I kind of came across when I was looking at things was one of the reasons is to really build a relationship with the people differently than what they've known before, because it's so much more content. Show them he and it said, I am your God. It showed them that he protected them, he took them away, but it also showed all the nations around what was going on, because I'm sure there's a lot of, they don't have the internet like we did, but I'm sure other nations quickly found out, look what their God did, and was able to kind of have that. But I don't know, it's kind of some of the things I came up with.
So, Sherry, another addition to a great answer. This is another great answer, which is the people that didn't have interweb, and even the folks who had really good DSL and Wi-Fi were able to recognize the greatness of Yahweh God through what He had done for His people, and Him having a better relationship or a different relationship with His people is great too, because all of those things add to this great Sunday morning answer.
And one other thing that I forgot to mention is they talked about all the things that afflictions that happened to the Egyptians were against certain gods.
Oh yeah.
So I thought that was very interesting, and I hadn't picked up on that.
Yeah. And Steve's actually presented this in the past before. And again, a guy who can't speak, it's unfortunate that his larynx has been so damaged in the accident. But yeah, all of the plagues in a lot of ways pushed back the belief of the Egyptian deities. So it would be easy, if you remember when Ramses, alias Yulbrenner, or playing Yulbrenner, says his God is God because he supersedes all of the mythological powers of the Egyptian gods. So you guys are filling the roster with great answers.
But not what you're looking for.
So let me go to the guy looking at me here right now. Steve, so if you've recovered from your short-term amnesia and you are allowed to speak, what's the best answer?
You mean it's not social justice where the Israelites were oppressed by the oppressing Egyptians?
That feels like it's the best answer, and I certainly appreciate the collective salvation that's a part of that answer.
Oh, try again.
We had our conversation yesterday.
Well, well, you could sum it up with one word. His purpose.
Yes.
Which was, by the way, the Israelites were supposed to be essentially a priesthood, an example to the other nations.
Yes.
Of the one true God.
Yes.
Which is what we're also supposed to.
Yes. And so if the clamps were taken off of you again, Steve, and you were going to use that one word, what's the one word?
His. I already said it.
Don't so.
Okay. Oh, okay. I guess I didn't hear it on this end. So if you were going to say it in English.
Oh,
That'd be you, Gene.
oh my goodness.
Did I not say it?
Yeah, I said it.
He said it in English.
It said
He said it in Greek. So say it in English, please.
glory.
Glory.
His glory.
So let's make that better accessible to people in 2024. Better accessible.
Oh, I can't think like that. Sorry.
No, you're on the camera now, so you're talking.
Yeah.
So because I'm in a generous mood today, somebody go, if not all of you, go to Genesis 3:11 and 12. Genesis 3:11 and 12. And you will find the word that's there that's better accessible for folks in 2024. And I will also challenge you that it is repeated throughout early Exodus.
Genesis 3:11 and 12. Okay.
Genesis 3:11 through 12. When you get to the word, yell it out. Because Steve is right, but that term is one that's too elusive for us, even church people.
Genesis 3, 11 and 12.
Yep.
Okay.
Really?
I'm reading this and I'm going,
Who told
It's not the word naked.
is the word commanded?
Oh, did I say Genesis or Exodus?
You said Genesis.
I meant Exodus. Sorry.
That's why I kept going, you mean Genesis.
So close.
I'm not so generous because I gave you the entire wrong book to use. Exodus. Sorry about that. Oh, man. When you get to the word, yell it out.
I. That's how I was going.
Worship.
Who said? That's him. Exactly.
Wait a minute.
That's it.
Worship.
That's the word.
Oh, wait. Where do you see worship? Because I don't have worship on my translation.
You will worship God.
I have serve.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, wait, what?
Kind of like serve though.
That's why I was wondering where are you seeing worship? Because I don't see worship in my translation. I have serve.
Okay, what's the Hebrew? Sir.
Oh, it looks like it's, Alpha. Since you're asking.
Which is generally translated as?
Yeah, it basically is serve. Toy.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you like that in terms of more holistic loyalty, you know? Because worship can kind of get lost in the 21st century, right?
Yeah.
Serve actually is, for lack of a better term, it can be offensive to people. I want you to serve. It goes against liberation theology.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I had a friend, and he was at Knott's Berry Farm amusement park, and he had a shirt that said "Bond Slave in Christ," and this person got, or someone else did. This very liberal person got all offended and freaked out by it.
That sounds appropriate. I mean, think about
Oh, it's exactly right.
the gospel is offensive to people.
Yes. But my friend, he very quietly, good Jesus, kind of very quietly engaged him and explained what that meant, you know, and the person just listened, was intrigued, was like, that's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, but it's true. I think, I wish it said bond slave.
Yeah.
Just search.
Yeah.
Look up bond slave, it might be the same word.
You know what, I'd have to look at the Septuagint, and that may take some time, but the thing that really, I think we might be getting to, the word worship in English is kind of like a convolution of worship. And there we've got his glory, his doxo. We've got his worship, and we actually, because we we worship him, we serve him as well. And that's the other thing that is kind of backwards with a lot of religious groups, is they serve him to try to get into his favor. We
Correct.
serve because he is worthy.
That's good.
Correct.
I like that.
And that's why certainly I would have worked with bondservant, serve, or worship, because all of now, guys, about a year, 2 years ago, we did a whole training on bond servitude. So it's not like we haven't been down that road, right? But what you just said, Gene, carries a whole lot of weight, as a lot of religious groups serve to gain Yahweh's favor. If almost every Joel Osteen sermon you listen to is about God's favor, God's favor, God's favor, you have to understand that when true worship is happening because of Sotso, because of his glory, right? This is what is daunting for church groups. Ultimately, you may get nothing out of it. And guys, we talked about this when we studied bond servitude. When you serve because of his glory, ultimately, you may get nothing out of it.
Or you might get pain out of it.
Yes, you might, because of Sotso. So we're going to spend a little time talking about that, because if you guys are in agreement that the reason that Yahweh delivers the Israelites from Egypt is for his glory, and his glory includes the Israelites, by the way, and you can read, if you haven't read through Exodus recently, Moses regularly goes to Pharaoh and says, Yahweh says, let my people go so that we may worship him, which has the elements of that we may serve him, that we may be bond servants to him regularly throughout the early chapters of Exodus.
May I ask a clarification question real quickly?
Yep.
I thought I heard you a couple of times use the term, and I thought you were speaking Greek, and maybe I was hearing something, edit it out if you don't want. Sozo, which is salvation, versus doxo.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. I moved the S where the D should have been because it's just that kind of a Sunday, or Dunday, as we call it.
Thank you. And they're so related too, because he saves us for his glory too.
Absolutely. But I want us to focus on servitude. I want us to focus on worship, because those two are interchangeable. And please remember, I just challenged you to say, if because of God's Yahweh's glory, because of Jesus's glory, because of the Holy Spirit, who is also God, because of their glory, when you serve, you may get nothing. In fact, Diane even added to that, you may get heartache. Right? So that's why sometimes it's funny when people say, I serve at the pleasure of blah, blah, blah. You very rarely hear people say that anymore. You very rarely hear people say, at your service or my pleasure, when they're serving you. That's one of the neat things that you get at Chick-fil-A. That's
And then they tell you that.
people don't really mean when they say that anymore. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, just a couple things that come to mind to think, everyone can. For American cultural Christianity, we've separated worship from service. So worship means singing. We sing, we do this. It's serving is something extra. God should be thankful when he gets that kind of attitude.
Right.
And worship, very, very much. We've talked a little bit about this, especially with certain worship songs. It really is about us. No way would I worship and have it hurt my feelings or make me uncomfortable. In fact, I've heard believers say this. Well, worship should inspire me and make me feel good.
Okay.
And it's not really about us. There's a certain sense where, yeah, if you're getting into the presence of God, you're going to want to be renewed. You're going to want to be filled. But also, if you really get in the presence of God, you'll be knocked on your face, convicted, challenged,
Put out a joint
as well. Put in a joint, yes. It's just interesting. And so this raises the question, if worship's going to be a painful thing, why would I want to do that?
Right. In today's culture especially, and that's partly why we're having this discussion, guys, so we can revisit why the Lord's allowed us to stand, to move and transition the way that the Lord's allowing us right now. And when Steve talks about the music needs to be inspirational to me, because if it's not, then I don't even know why I would want to sing that. Well, one of the things that I fall back on when I'm thinking about that is very, very rarely do contemporary churches today sing, because they're going to sing the updated version of At the Cross. They throw that in like the middle as a segue because they're singing something else. But the original lyrics to At the Cross have for such a worm as I. Well, contemporary Christianity has changed those lyrics for sinners such as I, because we don't want to equate ourselves with the worthlessness, the valuelessness, the way that Isaiah recognized his worthlessness before Yahweh God. So we change things so that when we sing certain songs, it makes us feel uplifted. It makes us feel like we're special. And I'm not telling you folks that we're not. We are a royal priesthood, but the royal priesthood comes after the servitude, after the sincere, genuine worship. We're trying to help focus, guys, so that we don't get convoluted with what is contemporary and popular churchism as opposed to what the scripture is talking about. Make sense? And I like that Brother Steve helped to differentiate. Today's churches believe that worship is the music stuff. And that ain't it, guys. That's a large part of the worship, but that ain't the worship part. The whole of when we're together on our set aside day is worship. So we have to value every component as if it is service or an offering to the Lord. So let me jump to the second question, because you guys have nailed that now with the guy with the locked key mouth getting a little bit of Greek here. So we're killing it. Had a little bit of Hebrew visitation. I even jumped to the wrong book of the Bible. So we're batting about 200. So once you correctly identify Yahweh's purpose, which we've said is kind of a combination of his glory, but because of his glory, our servitude, our bond servitude, our worship, if we can put that in the right phraseology, our worship. What is your definition of worship? Now, again, you more talkative folks, how about you guys put the brakes on it for a second? What's your definition of worship? And so to help better shape it, what does it look like when you're engaged in worship? What's it look like? What is it? Kathy, are you out there in land? Out there in Captain Land?
She gonna say no.
What do you got there for an answer? What do you got there for an answer?
Well, when one worships anything, you think about, meditate on. So in worshiping God, one would meditate on his word, right?
So let me change your question as you're shaping it. So what's your definition and what's it look like when you're doing it? So let's move away from the one. You. What's it look like?
Service, prayer.
Okay. What kind of service?
Doing for others.
Okay.
That might be.
All right. What's the prayer that you just discussed? What's that look like?
Communicating with God, thanking him for the blessings that he's given, and
All right.
admiring him just for who he is.
Yes, that's amazing. Adoration. Pretty cool.
Thank you. Adoration. That's a word I couldn't come up with.
But I like admiring.
Yeah.
I like that change.
All right. Somebody else out there in Captain Land?
Well, sometimes with serving God, you're actually sometimes doing something you may not want to do.
Correct.
But
Correct.
it's what needs to be done, and that is what he calls you to do.
Correct. Very much. I'm always pleased to meet folks who are like Steve and who are like Gene and even like Bruce, who have some inclination that they have a gift for preaching or teaching, and then they perhaps go to seminary and settle themselves to be able to put themselves on the path to do that. When I was a kid growing up, the process of what my church folks called being called to preach was sometimes arduous. There would be people fighting. There would be people fighting, and they would come to our church services and they would ask for prayer because they didn't want to be called to preach. And yet they felt that they were being inclined to do that. And so it wasn't this gracious, graceful kind of, well, then let me enroll in school. It was not that. It was sometimes what we've seen some of the prophets experience, which is, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go. I don't want to be called into this. I don't want to have to deal with the people politics. And so when Sarah says sometimes serving is about doing things that are distasteful, yeah, I can't say that all of those examples I just gave you were 100% accurate, but I can say differently than I've been as an adult, I saw folks who were actively going, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And yet, at some point in time, they made themselves available to do that which they did not want to do. And so service, which one of the things is what Kathy said, service sometimes is not a pleasant thing. Service sometimes is a distasteful and an unpleasant thing. Other folks, what's it look like when you worship? What's your definition of worship?
I think worship is also being with His presence. Because when we are with Jesus, we are worshiping Him, being with Him, just like we're in His presence.
So, Andrew is talking about this thing that's quite difficult for church people to actually get their heads around, which is practicing the presence of Jesus. It's a neat book. Christians, it's like WWJD for a lot of church people, but there are very few of us who actually get this right. And
What's the frog? What's frog? What's frog? It's either WWJD or frog. You not heard frog?
Yeah.
Oh, fellow father.
Fully rely on God.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, yeah. Church people have a lot. We have a lot of cute acronyms, but we don't really sometimes either know what they mean or we don't really apply them. One of the fun things about Anju that I met about her when I met her in person, and I get this from her virtually, is you almost can't stop her from talking about Jesus. There might be times when Steve, who is a missionary and a pastor and a scholar guy, is probably looking to run away because Anju's maybe opening up a jar of Jesus in a place where it's, shh, how about we keep it on the down low? That folks is practicing the presence of Jesus.
That's mostly because I'm an introvert and I don't want to be bothered. Which is, that's kind of self-worship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Something a friend, spiritual mentor challenged me last week. I thought about sharing this. I didn't, but we were talking about practicing the presence of God because I was just new missionary, but I was really stuck spiritually. And I didn't want to be there. Talk about not liking your service. Get me the heck out of here. I hate this place. So he talked to me. He had me read Brother Lawrence's book. And I was frustrated by that. I was like,
Well,
I couldn't wrap my head around how to apply it. So he said this. He said, hey, set an alarm every 15 minutes. And when it goes off, I want you to just say, Jesus, you're here. That's it. Set it again. And he said, do that for 2 weeks. See if it makes a difference in your life. And it did. It made a huge difference. And I was like, oh, wow. I would be about to yell at somebody.
can you learn about
And so it was very helpful just to practice. So that was worship, I guess. So to get a definition of that, it's a constant realignment with His person and His purposes.
You're right. And, Steve, I thank you for the honesty there, because one of the things that you just uncovered is this. Guys, as much as some of us have grown up in church and you've been Christians all of your lives, right? Sometimes you need to develop the alarm clock that Steve just talked about, because you're living like you're taking for granted that everything's honky-dory. In fact, I'm going to make a statement before we finish about maybe some of us practicing the aspects of the frozen chosen. What Steve just discussed about the alarm clock, that says that he's looking to awaken himself or be alerted to something that perhaps he's missed. And guys, that's sometimes what church people, believers, that's what Christians walk around that's why we're so impotent, is that we listen to the cute things that Steve just said. We nod our heads, but then we don't actually adopt any of that. So we don't build the muscle, and then we never ever get comfortable in doing anything other than we've already done. And that's in many ways representative of the frozen chosen. And we'll talk about the frozen chosen before we end today.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
so another quick thing, maybe back over to Anju, but I'm thinking of her context. Why she kind of like this with Jesus is because Hinduism is that way. In Nepal, everything is spiritual and it's integrated with everything. So, Anju, you can correct me on this, but going into work, you're going to go into your place of work and you're going to acknowledge that God's there, do something worshipful there before you get to work and as you're working throughout the day, even in the office. Would that be correct, Anju?
Yeah. There's a like every corner there's a goddesses and then even you go before in front of your door you worship that to go to the work. It's like very spiritual, and it's like first thing you wake up is like you worship all those god and goddesses, clean up everything and thinking about it. Actually, now when Steve said, I didn't really get that. When you wake up, is the first thing is thinking about is like, okay, clean up all the house for God, and then first God actually, that is
it's seamless.
And worshiping, and then only you can eat or drink anything. That's the
Hindu gods?
Yes, Hindu gods, yeah. And at the same time, I will say to you, that's like a main person, it's my mom, in my family, my mom or grandma will do, we not all need to do, but we have already concept of my mom and grandma.
You know what's happening.
Yeah, I need to worship this.
So every morning, the home is consecrated.
Yep.
Right, Anju?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That ain't a bad thing.
No, it's not. Well, it's bad. It's bad in those spirits, but
Yes.
then I'm thinking about how I thought as a missionary. For me, for the believers, we don't have these concrete representations in place, and so the believers these are Nepali believers. They're talking about it, or they're doing it. They're looking for ways to fill that vacuum, so to speak, and they are doing it with Jesus. But from my point of view, I found it fake and annoying. Okay, from my Western perspective, I judged it because I'm like, dude, you're just going through the motions. And to be fair, I think some of them were and are. But I think for that first generation, where they're like, Christ could result in severe persecution, imprisonment, possibly death, and they're still pressing in with these things. For them, it was very real. For the second generation, I think there was and is a lot going through the motions type of thing. But what's sad is that I judge that as a Westerner without really thinking it through or being challenged by it.
Yep. And I appreciate that, Steve, is that one of the blessings that I hope folks will eventually appreciate about Anju is she's going to be a shot in the arm in some ways, maybe like either Paxlovid or a good vaccine, a real vaccine, where we get that was political commentary. Sorry about that. Where we get a chance to see not through the scope of our westernization, but we get to see from the scope of someone who understands spiritualism and spirituality in a very different way than American mysticism and spiritualism takes its place. So the purpose of our worship is about service, is about how we, Gene is very fond to always say it's demonstrating that there's a worthshipness, and those are neat words, but then the practice from this question is how do we practice it? And I like Steve's, if you can use Steve's example about the alarm clock, helping him every 15 minutes to focus his eyes on Jesus, to think about Jesus, and in some ways, he wanted to hit the guy after he was introduced to that alarm clock aspect, because sometimes once you start the muscle and you get why the muscle's been started using, you don't go back. That's why Steve Steve J is kind of an ardent guy with lifting, because he understands what the positive impact has been for his body and for his health and for in doing that. And so, you're probably going to have to pull the weights out of Steve's dead hand. Rigor mortis is probably going to put that in, and he's probably going to have 75-pound weights curling on both arms. So sometimes once you start the work, you recognize the value of the work. But if you never start the work, you're hearing about people doing the work. And when Steve talks about, because he'll say regularly, I'm an introvert at heart. Well, I think some of the guys that you read about in the Bible are introverts. I think that Jeremiah guy doesn't identify as an ID, whatever. But I think that guy might have been a bit of an introvert, and he struggled with ageism. I'm too young, and it shouldn't be me. So there are examples in the scriptures of guys who went, I don't want to do this. I don't want to serve. And yet they were effective. So let's jump now, having explored this early Exodus 3 stuff, talking a little bit about personal worship and service, what it looks like or what it should look like, right? And let's go to question 3. So why did the Israelites construct or wish to construct the golden calf? Why did they construct or wish to construct the golden calf?
They were impatient.
Who said that?
That would be me. Sorry.
The patient personally.
I couldn't wait for that answer. Yeah.
I was impatient to say it.
So what were they impatient about?
Well, they were impatient waiting for Moses to come down off of the mountain. They figured he was dead. Because they figured he was dead.
So I'm giving you guys some pushback, but this is not just for Sarah to answer. It's for us to be able to get our heads around, folks. So why were they impatient for Moses to come back?
Because I think they got to the point they were worshiping him so much. God, so when he wasn't there, they felt like they needed something tangible.
So, Sherry, you're saying a really bad thing right now. You're saying that although Yahweh delivered them, Yahweh performed the miracles, they were pretty much looking at the dude.
Mm-hmm. We all like to look at the dude, don't we?
Yes. And
We want to see what we're following.
We've been doing it all our lives.
right. And the dude went on furlough. Because
maybe he was sabbatical. He was sabbatical.
Yeah, or sabbatical. He told me he was going, but they didn't know for how long he was going to be away. And obviously it was too long.
Yeah.
Now,
and it was a magical time because that cat came out of the fire.
Oh, man.
okay. Well, yep, that's my buddy Aaron, who believes strongly in magic. I put the gold in and poof. I don't know what happened.
There's a song that I really hate to sing anymore. And it's a Christian song that it's all about you.
Yeah.
Because every time I sing it, I'm thinking, really? Or is it all about me?
Yeah.
Because I give God a little bit, but I don't give him everything.
So, let's take a look at something maybe because Christians read the Bible less and they watch TV more, that they mix this up. So when we watch the 10 Commandments, the 10 Commandments doesn't happen until significantly kind of later. Maybe 3, maybe 7 days. I don't know the time span in the documentary that has Moses starring as Charlton Heston and Pharaoh as Yul Brynner. So when we watch that, it looks like, well, you know what? We can forgive the Israelites because they don't really know any better. But if you read Exodus, I see Steve's face. If you read Exodus, folks, what do we know about potentially that reasoning?
I thought they already had.
Who said that?
Sherry? Say that loud. Say that loud.
I thought they already had the 10 Commandments at that point.
They did orally.
Yeah.
They did.
He got-
And part of the reason that they liked Steve Captain before he went up the mountain is because when they couldn't handle Yahweh God telling them the 10 Commandments, they went, could you just tell that guy and that guy will tell us? And so that guy certainly told them and told them a lot of the other governing laws about worship for Yahweh. Does that make sense for those of you who've read that interesting book? So by the time we get to the golden calf thingamajigger, they don't have an excuse that says, well, you didn't tell us yet that we should have no other gods before us. You didn't tell us that we shouldn't make any graven image. We didn't know that, because they did.
So it's almost like going back to the Garden of Eden, where they start the blame game. And here the Israelites were like, hey, I don't want to have that direct relationship with God, but you can do that, and then I'll work with you instead of being held accountable to God directly.
Yeah, and go ahead, Steve.
Notice what they did too, though. This is kind of funny. But what they did is when things weren't going the way that they thought that they should, the way that, Moses didn't come back immediately, didn't, here's the law and all this stuff. They reverted to what they knew. They just come out of Egypt.
Their comfort zone.
Right? Egypt built their little monuments, their statues, and they worshiped those things. They went back to what they knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went back to that comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I want you to hold on to that, guys. I want you to hold on to what you just said. Is they went back to what they knew, and they went to the comfort zone. And I also want you to think a little bit about what Diane said. It's all about you. It's all about you. Well, not really. When we go to church, for the most part, it's all about us. It's really kind of all about us. All right, and I'll get us there if it doesn't seem to make sense that we are moving there, because it really is kind of all about us. As long as some of my creature comforts get met when we do whatever this worship stuff is, I'm good. I'm game to stick around a little bit longer. Thank you for that, Sarah. That these guys considered constructing the golden calf because they was impatient. Moses was taking just a little bit too long. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit more and ask the questions. So why did the Israelites fail? And it's wrongly written in your slack line. Why did they fail to possess all of the promised land under Joshua's leadership? Now, we might get some interesting discussion here, and I'm ready for that if we need to do that. Why did the Israelites fail to possess all of the promised land under Joshua's leadership? And by the way, because I'm generous and I'm either misleading you today, I'm going to share with you, if you go to Joshua 11, 21 through 23, you're going to read something that contradicts what I just said. So go ahead and read Joshua 11, 21 through 23. And then, if you can, respond to the question that seems very contradictory that I just asked. Uh-oh.
We're saying Joshua 11, 21 to 23, into the chapter.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, what's your uh-oh for?
Well, I just asked you, why did the Israelites fail to take all the land that Yahweh promised them under Joshua? But Joshua 11, 21, 23 says something else, doesn't it?
Well, it says Joshua took the whole land.
Joshua took the entire land.
Right. How could I say that?
Well, they didn't completely destroy their enemy in certain areas. And
Yes.
they allowed them to stay because they didn't seem to be a threat to me.
Yes. And my proof for that, and I've got Steve laughing, so I'll know I hit this right if I don't get Steve shaking his head, is some of the skirmishes that happened during the book of Judges, but certainly during 1 Samuel. when David is king wouldn't have happened if they had subdued all of the people in the land. So indeed, they had the land that the Lord promised, but they didn't subjugate all the people because, like you say, Diane, they didn't consider them a threat. And they weren't right now. Let's see.
Oh, I was just laughing because I was thinking about that particular group of folks who just showed up and said, wow, we were travelers from a long distance.
Give me a night. Give me a night.
Okay.
And so the root cause of their not, they're failing to fulfill what God told them to do was they didn't confer with God. They weren't obeying God. They weren't talking to God about the Gibeonites and or even Ai.
Yeah.
It even gives you a little taste in this passage because it says there was none of the Anakim left in the land of the people of Israel, only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod, and some remained.
Right. Right.
Anything changed?
And so, just as proof, so that you know, I actually kind of spend a little bit of time in the scripture. If you go to, and you don't need to do it now, Joshua 13:1 and Joshua 23:11 help you recognize that indeed they occupied the land, but there were still factions that in many ways had yet to be subjugated. But they weren't an issue because of the advance warning that that Sherry had talked about that Yahweh had, and folks were pretty much scared. That's why Steve brings up the Gibeonites, because them dudes were about as savvy and as smart as anybody should be. I almost wish I was a Gibeonite going, excuse me, we came from a long way. Don't kill us. Break a pact.
He's done a lot of stuff, baby.
So let me suggest this to you, that the Israelites, in many ways, like Diane said, they didn't consider these guys a threat, so they didn't subjugate them and quash them totally. But I'm also going to suggest this. From the timeline that seems to exist in the Bible, the Israelites, after crossing over the Jordan and taking Jericho and then beginning to take the Promised Land, that was about a 7-year skirmish, 7-year campaign. And if it's fair for me to suggest, because this doesn't exactly, the Bible doesn't exactly say this, but it alludes to this. They were tired.
What's that?
They were tired of waging war. They wanted to live in the land that they had taken. They were tired of waging. They were tired of skirmishes. They were tired of campaigns. Does anybody want to push back off that?
War is a bloody business. Not pleasant.
I'm not saying this stuff. You guys is. I'm just trying to tell you what the Bible says and shape it a little bit.
Well, plus there was half of Manasseh and Ephraim was on the other side of the river, and they were away from their families.
Yeah.
Can we like that?
Really? Right. Can we get what we were promised plus this stuff that we've been managing for 7 years? They're tired. By the way, thank you guys for indulging me with this discussion. So let me jump to the last question that's put in the Slack line. Doesn't mean it's the last question, but it's the last that I throw at you. So why did the Israelites want a king instead of the judges and the prophets that they had from the time of Moses until Saul?
They were tired.
Okay, Gene, if you're going to answer that, what were they tired of?
Tired of being different.
That's good.
How about even bigger? Even bigger.
They wanted to be like everybody else.
Well, and that's the same thing. Yeah. Sarah's saying they wanted to be like the rest of the culture, the world that was around them. They wanted to be just like everybody else. And thus they wanted to fit in. Which
So if that's the answer, which it is, that's a grand and a wonderful answer. What were they tired of?
Can you guys speak up, Ethan?
Go for it, dude. It's loud.
Nice and loud, someone took a soccer ball.
They're tired of being abnormal.
They were tired of being abnormal, he said.
Like I said, start being different.
Yeah, and I think that theme works even when Ethan kind of says it. It works. What were they ultimately tired of?
But
Trust. in
Worshiping
something they
God.
can't
Yeah, say again. Who said that?
Rules.
worshiping God,
Rules.
Trusting.
Jay, something.
Judges and prophets, their reasoning and rulings came from God.
Yeah.
You got a king, well, the king, he's the main man. He's
Right.
I'm kind of tired of listening to God.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, Jerry. And I think Gene had said it too earlier, and you walk right into it the best way, which is the prophets and the judges were getting their marching orders from Yahweh. And they wanted to get their marching orders from a guy. So for the most part, they were tired of Yahweh. And if you want to see that,
They were constantly. Through the judges and the prophets, he was telling them how bad they were.
be careful because it's gonna come back.
right. And if you want an example of this, if you go to 1 Samuel 8:1-9, it is the disappointing interaction that Yahweh has with Samuel when Samuel kind of goes, they've rejected me. They don't like me no more. I'm old and my kids are terrible. And Yahweh pretty much says, well, yeah, that's kind of true. But they've rejected me and not so much rejected you. Even though, you're worth rejecting, but they've rejected me.
Yeah. True.
So, does this line of questioning seem to be a cogent one and a reasonable one to consider? By the way, I'd be getting in some trouble today because I'm actually teaching Old Testament prehistoric application stuff. This stuff doesn't work in today's church because we're a New Testament church under grace.
Well, first off, it's not prehistoric because they're historical accounts. Those would not be the same thing. Prehistoric, historic accounts.
Okay.
Andy Stanley was teaching today.
What's that?
I didn't know Andy Stanley was teaching today.
Uh-oh.
You're a terrible man, Steve J. So, guys, why would I ask you these old-timey, old-fashioned questions this morning?
Don't we need to understand the Old Testament to understand where we are, even in the New?
Okay.
I mean, people think that the Old Testament doesn't make a difference, but it does because you can see a lot of the same, the same patterns, the same things that were going on then are going on even now in, the current time frame that we're in.
Yes, Brother Steve.
We outsource. We outsource to the pastor the same way they wanted to outsource to a king.
And not only that, it's occurred to me, and this may or may not be relevant, the Gibeonites again, they became woodcutters and water carriers for the burnt altar and the laver. So they actually end up doing some of the work, the labor, the service for Yahweh. Outsourcing it again.
I think of when I was a youth pastor and parents wanted me to fix their kids. And I'm like, I didn't break them. So I remember getting called on the carpet because, these kids aren't reading the Bible enough. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, and are mom and dad reading the Bible at all?
Yeah.
And are they teaching their kids to do this? And very often it would get put on me to they would even say it this way: it's your job to spiritually train up these kids. I'd be like, no, it's not. It is not my job. I can be a support. I can help serve that, but it's not my job. And I think we do that. Well, that's exactly what the Israelites were doing with the king. They didn't want to depend on Yahweh anymore. They were tired of that. They were tired of having that direct relationship. They were tired of relying on God to protect them because that's too anxiety provoking. I'd rather rely on a king with an army. That's something concrete I can see. And so it'll become his job. Then I have someone I can actually vote out or fire or blame for my lack of relationship with God or dependence upon God or whatever. That should give me another 6 months. That's the whole.
Steve's comment right now is one that if you've not realized it or if you've not read it recently or read it at all, that's partly why the Lord told David not to take a census. Is the point was not to rely on your horses and rely on your chariots. It's to rely on the might of Yahweh God. That's how David was a mighty man, mighty conqueror. Even his 30 mighty men of David were supernaturally allowed to be that because of Yahweh God. So the point was not to count your horses, your chariots, take a census of your fighting men. The point was, if you led with the Ark of the Covenant because the Lord instructed you to do so, then you had victory because the Lord said you were going to have victory. And Steve's saying it's too anxiety-inducing to wait for the Lord to show up and then tell us it's time to fight. If a guy just does that, as soon as he says 1, 2, 3 red light or 1, 2, 3 green light, I'm going. And when it doesn't work very well, I can blame the guy, and then we can storm the castle and take him and his family out. So let me jump a little bit if this bridge in some ways makes sense. By the way, I'm going to try to make this come back and be personal for us in a couple of minutes. Okay. So what actions, what behaviors, what accomplishments do you believe are valued by the Lord Jesus? Now, understand my question. If I framed it too objectively, here's what I mean. What do you believe that the Lord Jesus values in your actions, your behaviors, your accomplishments? And he goes, yes, that's my child. Yes, that's my brother. Yes, I'm glad I died for him. Yes. What are those accomplishments, those actions, those behaviors, those achievements? Please, and I'm looking at Gene's face. I'm not saying the Lord really does that. I'm saying if there was a tally that was about crowns that were delivered to you so that you'd be able to put them at his feet when you're in eternity, what are those actions, those behaviors, those accomplishments that makes the Lord smile as opposed to, there they go again?
Oh my.
And some of you quieter members can weigh in as well.
And there's legitimacy in that because in Romans 12, 1 and 2, we need to find out what pleases the Lord. And part of our worship is being that living sacrifice so that we will know, we won't be guessing. Maybe that's a little bit of a indictment against us. We're struggling to think of those things right now.
It's living like we're in heaven at this moment. Is that our home or is this our home? And if what we're doing doesn't honor God every second, then we're not there yet. I mean, we're called to be and do what Jesus did and what he commanded us to do. And his love should compel us to do. But it's not my job. I love that.
Oh my God, Mom.
We love to say that because it's not in my wheelhouse. I can't step out and do that because I'm not gifted like that. Well, if we're operating in the Holy Spirit, he's going to give us what we need to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. But mainly measuring those things in what I do every day, long way to go.
So because Diane answered this question the way that she did, and I didn't anticipate that would be an answer that would come across, but thank you. So here's my question. What would we/you rather do than the stuff that Diane just said just now? What would you rather do than the stuff that Diane just said?
Anything.
That's just like he's doing the commercial. What do I love worse than, or hate worse than, or want to do more than mopping the floor? Anything. This is kind of the same thing. Yeah.
So, Kathy, when you say anything, what do you mean? How about an example of anything?
Read a book. Watch
Okay.
TV.
Yep.
Go play golf.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let somebody do it for me.
Go run a marathon.
Well, I don't think anybody. Maybe the Steves are considering running a marathon because that would be something preferable. That would be
Yeah.
Oh, and Sarah's probably would be crazy enough to do that too. So yeah.
My knees and my feet can't do that. Things that
Watch clothes.
things you don't want to do, but yet you'd rather do those than serve God.
Oh wow, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes we'd rather do things we hate than we serve.
Exactly.
Okay. So I very much embrace what Kathy's just said through all of these different activities, and you guys ultimately saying we'd rather do stuff we hate than do stuff that would honor the Lord Jesus. I would tell you folks that in many ways, that's what the Talmud is. That the Jews made up a whole bunch of rules as they looked at the law and said, we'd rather do this instead.
Couple of points if I may, and this may be worthless, but it's okay. Edit it out. One of the things is Steve mentioned Romans 12, 1 and 2. And one of the things that is mentioned there is that we're able to prove what is that, or demonstrate what is that good, acceptable, perfect will. This is our reasonable service. The word service there is the same word in the Septuagint for our beginning verse in Exodus 3. Service. And there in the Septuagint, they're the same. One of the other things I noticed, and this is just a passing comment, the word that is in the Septuagint, we'll go that, is written in such a way that it is future, but it's also active and continuous. So he's saying that because we're looking at Septuagint version of Exodus 3, verse 12, he says that you may future and ongoing serve me. Basically, exactly the way Paul does Romans 12 too. So I think that's really cool. The point is the wood cutting and the water fetching and all that sort of thing was part of their worship. They didn't see it that way. And we need to get to, I mean, there's a slavery, there's a servitude. We don't want to be doing what Yahweh God tells us to do. We want to do what we want to do. We want to be in the driver's seat, so to speak.
That's correct. And we want our churches to operate according to what we want as opposed to what honors Yahweh. Because very infrequently do churches with a lot of programs ask about every program and every concept and every presentation, does this honor and glorify Yahweh God? Now, I'm going to jump to us in a moment, but I want to get back to a phrase that I mentioned earlier to help you understand it, the frozen chosen. Now, the frozen chosen is a labeling that is kind of thrown at a denomination, and it's thrown at a denomination, the Presbyterians, who aren't evangelical. And here's why it's placed on the Presbyterians who aren't now, and I saw you, Gene, who are not evangelical. Because the Presbyterians, for the most part, who are not evangelical, believe so much in the sovereignty of God and in predestination that they don't need to do anything. And thus, they teach the Bible, they preach the Bible, they sing some really cute songs, but they're not going to be about their Father's business because he's so awesome and he's so sovereign and he's so predestined. Every movement that people make and everything that they say, they have no responsibility in Yahweh's major plan. And thus they are frozen. So they go through their lives believing that this is what and only what I should do, because if God wanted me to do something else, then he would. He'd make me do something else.
How do they explain gifts and commandments from Jesus of what we're supposed to be doing then, if they read the Bible?
Because sometimes the reliability on certain phrases, certain components of the Bible linger more strongly for us than the whole counsel of the Bible. Does that make sense? A learned gentleman in the room that we like. That's why we have this different denominations, because we've lingered on a point or a phrase or a component longer than the whole counsel of the Bible. That's why, for instance, sprinkling, immersing, and whatever the other one is happens. We split over baptism. That's why the Mormons pray for the dead, because folks get a certain scripture in their craw, and then that's what they want to major on, instead of thinking of, like Gene said, although we call it the New and the Old Testament, it's really one testament.
That's right.
So we don't think about it from beginning to end. We like to take the stuff out of it that we like a lot. Seventh-day Adventists. The reason that Jesus hasn't come back is because you heathens worship on Sundays instead of Saturdays. Right? The Methodists.
Every day, every moment, we're awake, even sleeping.
Sure. All of that doesn't matter, because it's just Sundays, Saturdays that matter. So a lot of groups try to do what they like. And they like doing what they like so much, they don't do what it is that Yahweh actually asked them to do. So this is probably for Steve, maybe a little bit for Gene, but this would be really better for Bruce if he was here. There's kind of an adage, unparaphrased, among congregations that says this: when congregations begin to tire or sicken of a teaching or a training, they're just beginning to get it. When congregations tire or sicken of a training, that's when they're just beginning to get it. If you've listened to some very erudite and wonderful teachers or preachers, they've said this to you and you've probably sloughed it off. We could spend a year on John 3:16. And we would move from John 3:16 once you get it. And congregations hear that, but they don't really understand what that means. And what it means is kind of what I just said, is when congregants begin to tire or sicken of a teaching or a training, they're just beginning to get it. Yes.
Just maybe a refinement of that, and maybe I'm wrong, and if so, just tell me. It seems as about the time that the one doing the preaching and teaching is getting tired of it, they may still be beginning to get it. So the leader, the preacher, the proclaimer may be getting tired of it, but about that time is when the congregation, the listeners, the learners might begin to get it.
Yes, and I think that that's the popular technique, the popular saying, when we are questioning the speaker. When we're questioning the congregation, which we rarely do, the congregations don't always go, I wish my church wouldn't do this. But let me throw some things out for you to help you understand people getting sick of stuff. The Israelites got sick of manna. The Israelites got sick of Moses. The Israelites got sick of marching. They got sick of camping. They got sick of fighting. They got sick of war. They got sick of waiting. They got sick of the miraculous. They got sick of leadership. Make any sense or untrue? Am I pulling this out of an orifice I don't have, or is this making sense?
I think it makes sense, unfortunately, because we're the same way. We're tired of battle, quite frankly. And we talk about it as though sometimes we get tired of doing the battle that is spiritual as opposed to the bloody war that I talked about. Sometimes
I hear you talking to sometimes we, but see, again, we want to make this stuff as personal as we can make it, right? So it's nice to say one gets tired. Well, perhaps this lesson today is for us, and this lesson today is for us because in many ways we've forgotten why we're here. We're on the cusp of securing/procuring a new building. But I think that the fear about the building, folks, is gonna make us believe we've got a king. The fear of the building, guys, is in some ways because we've been impatient. We're impatient kind of at the camp at the base of the mountain, and we want to not be an anomaly, and we want to kind of be like everybody else. And most of all, we've forgotten why the Lord pruned, why he called us out, why he's kept this group together in the way that he has, because there's a comfort in it. It's nice that we've made better friendships. We've been able to visit with each other more regularly. And all of those things are nice and cute. But the Lord's called us together for the purpose of worshiping him. Now, my last question before we end today, because I'm gonna post something after I talk with the elder group on Wednesday, after we've had a chance to talk through it, to help you understand that as much as it may not seem as though we talk about it a lot, we really have been trying to cast vision all through all of these lessons all the time. So just because it looks like we're about to rent a building and stuff like that, it doesn't mean that this is all brand new and unknown. We have bathed this stuff in prayer, in asking the Lord for wisdom and discernment, and saying, if this is a right thing, help lead us to it. If it's a wrong thing, close the doggone door, Lord. We're okay with that. And some of us have argued with the Lord to say, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What do you want from us with this? And the Lord can handle that. Yahweh can handle that.
Amen.
I'm only going to end with this one, but I could do that with other components of our service. And if you will, I'll name the services before we discontinue and move to the next thing. But I want to talk with you just a little bit about Jesus encounters. Because I know, especially even distantly, I watch some of us, and when it gets to the Jesus encounters time, your eyes gloss over. And just so you know, I'm however many miles away from you I am, and I know that. That's also particularly why I linger to let you guys in the room together feel uncomfortable on purpose. It's not that it's that I'm hoping, I'm begging that somebody steps up. It's when I hear the silence and I see your eyes gloss over, what it does is, and I'm telling you today, it saddens me that you've forgotten why we do that. You've forgotten how we got there. So can somebody help me, if you will, help me understand why we do the Jesus encounters, if you can, and why they're a part of our service. And then I'm going to close this part out by having Steve say something that I think is key, that we just learned maybe as an elder group the other week. And I think it's key for you guys to hear. But can somebody help me understand, how do we do these Jesus encounters? How did we get here? Is this something that Preston just made up and said, go and do likewise? How did we get here? And if you don't remember, please say, I don't remember, as opposed to not saying anything at all, because I'll help you, because I remember this stuff. If I don't catalog it or document it, I think the Lord has brought us where he has, almost like the doggone Israelites out of Egypt. So I'm trying my best to journal and chronicle this stuff so we don't forget. So how do we get to those Jesus encounters?
I don't remember.
Appreciate that.
It's that.
I think part of the reason was to kind of help push us out of our comfort zone and give us opportunity, and rather be in a large thing, a one-on-one opportunities to talk to people about Jesus, whether it was with our family or people that we meet as we go about, but to have it with us, to be able to share as we go back, not just here in a church setting.
You're right, Sherry. What inspired that?
Your year challenge?
Say again?
Year challenge where we were supposed to look at our families and report back.
Yes. 2-3 years ago, guys, after a training we had, you all said that it is important to tell our families and friends close to us about Jesus. You all said that through the interjections and the participation in training. Now, recognize you all physically didn't say that, but for the most part, the majority of you didn't push back and say, nope, that's stupid. I hate my family. They should all be in Hades. You didn't do that. You all agreed from the majority that the training and the answers are those things that I agree with. So what was the assignment originally based on what Diane just said? What was the very first assignment? Kathy, you got this one? What was the very first assignment?
To talk to those in our family about Jesus, find out where they were, and
Okay. And when were you going to report on that?
where? Here.
When? It was gonna be at the beginning of the new year, we're gonna,
Right.
or, yes,
That's right. Beginning of the new year. How successful were we with you guys following through with talking to these folks that were part of your family and reporting on that for the new year? Thank you. How about yelling that out, Gene?
I spoke to my brother.
Yeah.
So Gene, you just made a sound. What's a word that goes with the sound that you just made?
Successful, not so much.
Right.
We had very little, and I'm just speaking for myself. Number one, I encountered, because I'm kind of an introvert, I encountered very few people other than my family, and I went to the family first, and somewhere along the line, that becomes the most difficult because they know me. And so I had very few, apart from, I think, my mom, and I've actually done some of this before. My mom and just kind of confirming that. Very little reporting, very little follow through, and quite frankly, this is one of the things that I know is a shortcoming in my life, because we get an assignment, homework assignment, and I don't follow through.
So, Brother Gene, I very, very much appreciate you bearing that candidly with us, because, guys, that's how we got to Jesus Encounters, is exactly what Brother Gene said. And Brother Gene, at least, is a guy who's saying this aloud. There are some of us who never say anything about this, who never at all seem to talk about Jesus during the course of our lives. But what Brother Gene said was true, is we said that we were making a commitment to talk to these folks because we don't meet a whole lot of people. We don't get out of our circle. We at least would talk with our families, and we didn't. And so the assignment got to be this, guys, we need to start practicing someplace. We need to start practicing someplace, because we had talked about being a royal priesthood. We had talked about being our Father's business. So we were then charged with try it little by little. Talk to someone that you meet that may not be a family member about Jesus and report how that goes. And guys, that's where our Jesus Encounters came from. So I recognize that they're tedious and they're embarrassing and they're off-putting because they make you sort of go, oh, I guess I have to do this. But guys, worship is not about doing what you want to do. Worship.
This is the wake-up call for all of us, because if we're not willing to step out even for our families and see where they are, that is a heart issue for all of us.
Yes.
And I have struggled these last few years with where my heart is. What is important?
Now, can I add to that or piggyback on that?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about myself when I fail in those ways. I'm thinking of specific family members where I have tried or I encounter resistance, or if I really want to be brutal, well, yeah, they kind of deserve to go to Hades.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you, Steve. Yes.
And that means there's something wrong with my heart. Obviously. Now what do I do with that? Very common what I see in the churches. I'm like, yeah, I got this issue, and well, let's wait this, and we move on. And I'm saying this for me. I'm not intending to be like whipping anybody, because I will tend to whip myself if I don't measure up to a certain standard, which is the opposite of the gospel, right? But the gospel also is not, oh, praise Jesus, he died for me, I'm good where I'm at, thanks, see you later. It's okay, I am okay where I'm at, and God wants to take me more. Now, so for me, I need to take my heart to the Lord. I'll say like with my own brother, if I resist pulling the trigger. Done, thanks, ironically, thanks to Jesus Encounters, sometimes I have done some things with them because I'm like, can't have got anything this week. I'll make our my brother. Which has resulted in some good things. But resisting that, I don't want to go there. I don't want to disturb things in the family. All of that may be true. Now my next step is to go before the Lord, and maybe with some of you, go before the Lord and say, what is going on there? And that'd be awesome if for, it may not be this Tuesday, but our midweek worship thing, to get to that level of vulnerability. I'm not saying I'm there yet. I've been very vague if you're listening to what I'm saying. But lay it out there and say, I have got this issue. I have this bitterness toward this family member. Maybe that doesn't come out in this context, but when I'm worshiping, all of a sudden the Lord nails me. And I'm like, you know what, guys, I need to confess. It just hit me. The reason I am not willing to do Jesus Encounters with my brother, the reason I'm encountering this resistance is because I am still, pardon the language, but I want it to be visceral for a reason. I'm still pissed because of what he did to me when I was 10. And I haven't let that go. I need some help letting that go. Then we can worship together, pray about that, remove that. Now I might be willing to pull the trigger on that, because you know what? If Jesus help me forgive him for that, and I can see Jesus forgives him for that, that sorry sap needs Jesus. Does that make sense? Everything I'm saying?
Yes.
You know?
You've got a wonderfully evolved sensibility, and I hope at some point in time that's what this group can borrow from you, that ability to be naked before the Lord and just say, I'm naked and I suck and I'm stupid. Can you?
Well, and now I'm going to have to, honestly, because I can feel some emotions coming up, I'm going to have to go alone with the Lord. I'll do that while I'm driving towards Anjali, I guess, and be like, okay, Lord, what's that about? Is there truth in that? Is there some issue there I need to take a look at in order to move forward with my own family members? Some of that, I think, can be wanting acceptance from them, not wanting to experience a rejection, or there goes the Bible thumper again, or whatever it is, you know. So,
guys, where Steve is right on, and that's why that's kind of where Jesus Encounters started, guys. It was, and I've learned this, if not through my wife, certainly through my wife and Diane, is through the practice of Jesus Encounters. I've gotten kind of fearless in talking with people that I supposedly care about eternity, that I know right now are not headed for eternity with Jesus. Because, and see, what Steve is talking about is talking about people who we think about as SOBs, or that they deserve pretty much eternal separation, because I know all those people and I regularly catalog them every day. But if I'm at least going to get my head around talking to people that I dislike, that I don't think deserve Jesus, shouldn't I start with people I say I care about? And so with my kids, for instance, where I thought that was a closed door because they're so intellectually opposed to the Lord Jesus. Well, the door's wide open in part because I'm their dad, and in part because I know Jesus and they know what we presented about Jesus to them. So it doesn't matter that they don't want to hear about it. It's my job to tell them about it, because if they matter to me, then I need to tell them. And by doing that with people who matter, then maybe the Lord will evolve me to the point where I can do it with people who don't matter. And the Jesus Encounters guys are supposed to help you, maybe because you can't go to your own kids or to your cousins or whomever. Do it with a perfect stranger. So let me remind you of a thing, close with a thought, and then I'll give it up to Steve. He wants to say something here. Guys, this is why we're in the midst of the prayer workshop. We're in the midst of the prayer workshop because if we regularly involve ourselves in the process of discussion, conversation, having a little talk with the Godhead, that can shape us regularly because we're then not relying on our own understanding. We're practicing fear of Yahweh God by saying, I don't know, like a little kid, I don't know how to come in and go out. You inform me. That's why we're focused on prayer, guys, so that we can remember that sometimes service and worship to Yahweh God, to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit puts us in uncomfortable positions. Jesus encounters would be one of those. Let me tell you a little bit, and I won't get long about this, but I'll tell you, I think why a lot of us don't like Jesus encounters, because I'll tell you one I had this week. I told you that some of you have met our crazy dog, and I think actually Sherry and Jerry, you guys actually like him. He likes you, so. But he's asocially inclined, and thus my wife has come up with like business cards that she has to give to people when they go, your dog is like a maniac, and it's, he's adopted, or that kind of stuff. He's a rescue. So we've got a dog park down here that is pretty neat. And if you've been to a dog park before, you've got separation between the little dogs and the big dogs. 20 pounds is kind of the judgment point. And Baristo's about like 21 pounds, so he can go on either side. And he's little enough where he looks like a fox/lion, but he's a lot less if you squeeze his fur. So I had spent some time meeting a guy on a few days who, after probably 2-3 days, I knew his entire life story. Divorced, separating from a lady who he rescued from Colombia, and we were beginning to talk about maybe how to put together the elements of his life. And we started talking a little bit because he's talking about now having a conversation with his lawyer and separating things as opposed to just giving this young lady the house, et cetera, that's down here, and he's separating the goods. And we talked a little bit. We started getting on the tail of politics. So we mentioned the governor here. Sometimes talking about this governor here leads to the presidential candidate who talks about pets being eaten in certain places without evidence. And as we then began to talk about the politics, he then made it very, very clear that he is ultra liberal. And I was saying, well, look, I said, and he said, there's no way I'm a Democrat. And I said, well, my wife and I are Republicans. I said, Jesus is. I said, we vote for the best person whose platform matches best what the scriptures are. I said, so I can't really worry about the craziness that either this governor or the presidential candidate or the president is going to engage in, because our hope is in eternity and with what Jesus wants from us. And when I went down that line, the guy turns to me. Now we were in the same cages on a couple of other days, but on this day he's got a small dog who can't get into the big dog cage, and I'm in the big one, which is much more expansive. And we're talking across the fence, kind of like a Shakespearean play. We've been talking this way today, and I thought we're getting a very good relationship. And he looks at me and he says, "I don't think we should talk anymore." He says, I think you stay on your side, I stay on my side, and that's the way we need to conduct business. And I said, sir, that's not how America was founded. I said, America is a melting pot of people having different ideals and being able to come together and talk about things and then figuring out how to be better friends and maybe learn a little bit from each other. Well, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Jeez. And thus, sometimes that kind of response is why we don't want to engage in Jesus encounters. Is turning somebody off, making somebody hate us, feeling bad about ourselves after we have what we think is a quality service interaction. But guys, that's what we're called to do. This is a gentleman who needs the word. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's an excuse. Really, I just don't want to do it. So I can find any excuse. Oh, well, maybe they won't like me, or maybe they'll be mean to me, or maybe, so what? I don't know them. But God loves them. God loves them. So I should also love them. And, you talked about nobody wants to be known as a worm. Well, that's what I am. And I have struggled with the fact that this worm wants to have command of everything. And it's definitely been a journey to figure out how very selfish I am with my time, with my talents, with my gifts.
Yeah.
You know, that just goes on and on. And that's the ultimate thing. And until we break that, we're no good to him.
Guys, we're having this lecture series today because the Lord might be blessing us with new duds, new relationships, and new stuff. If we fall into the habit of being back in Egypt, or if we fall into the habit of being managed by kings, or if we fall into the habit of we're tired and we're weary because we've been campaigning since 2013, then we're going to miss the providence of the Lord coming up, guys. And if I can put a plug in, guys, you may not be as loquacious as, say, a Brother Steve, a Sarah, a Diane, a Brother Gene, but guys, your voices are important. Young people, especially with the size that we are right now, if you are Jesus believers, you need to be serving. You need to be serving with us. So we're not waiting for you to get 16 or the special age of accountability or 28. Because if we're going to help you guys be able to go away to school and love Jesus and tell others about Jesus, you got to start serving him now. So that certainly Alina, Ethan, Michaela, Nate, Nate's always a good idea. Okay, stop waving, Ethan. Daniel, you know, all of our young people need to be about our Father's business. And guys, we can't embrace the change and the evolution that the Lord might be presenting us and have it be same old, and operate as the frozen chosen. And I'm going to put a communication in our Slack line so that you understand the components that we have right now that are worship oriented, from the Jesus encounters to the singing music to the praying to the announcements and the dining. They're all purposeful. They've all been bathed in prayer. There's a reason why we do them. Now, they may change and they may evolve as we discover better ways to do them, but there's a reason why we do them. And it's all about worship, all of it. So when your eyes glaze over or when you're hating it, as opposed to just letting your eyes glaze, ask the question. And I would say, ask Steve, ask Gene. If they don't have an answer for you right away, they're going to bring it to us as elders, and we're going to have an answer for you, hopefully within the week. Peter, and I think First Peter, after I read his short book, one of the things that's always been in my mind is one of the catchphrases in his letter. Remember these things. Remember these things. Remember these things. Remember these things. It's very, very easy, guys, to be 3 days out of Egypt and to want to go back to Egypt. It's very, very easy after 7 years war to want to not be at war. It's very easy after being a theocracy for 500 years to want a king. That's not why the Lord has separated us and called us apart, and for us to have gone through all we've gone through, folks, to just be the frozen chosen. I'm done. Brother Steve, want to take over, say anything before our next session? Thank you, by the way.
Before he does that, the young people are important also to give us input because we're a bunch of old fogies. You're living a whole different time in your lives than we are in ours. And we need your voices to tell us, you know, this is what it's like in my world. This is what I face in my world, because we're so far removed from that.
And we hate your world. We literally hate it.
We don't understand it as well, for sure.
Well, it's not going to be as cool as the 80s. We all know that. But we'd still like to learn. You know?
Yeah, and we need to be able to have something for you all, and then like, you know, we want to go forward in a way that helps you guys great as well. That means input.
If I could just say, one of the things that comes to mind with regard to the whole discussion we just had, actually maybe two things, one and a half. Preston, number one, and rather the half, you are proclaiming in a manner that makes me wonder of the complexion / tan Moses might have had. That's the half thing. Number two, with that,
You're very kind.
well, you are doing some of the tough stuff. And one of the things that comes to my mind is we've said before, the church is not a building. And the concern that I have is we may be thinking that a place that's going to be a park is kind of like a golden calf. So, thank you.
Hey, Brother Steve, I'm going to ask you to pray, even though we're going to transition to the next thing. Can you say, even briefly, the thing that you mentioned to Gene and Bruce and I on Wednesday? Because it's probably lingered with me, and I didn't realize that until you said it, that, we'd approached Steve, and Steve wasn't looking for anything. He certainly wasn't looking for us. And we didn't know with what Steve's background was. I mean, it made sense to reach out to him, but we didn't know that Steve was going to be the guy whose couch you guys are sitting on right now. And Steve said that, when he and Anju, et cetera, were considering all of the factors, that one of the things that that prompted him saying yes to us, and you can take that, Steve, if it makes sense.
Yeah, sure. For me, what I started to kind of think about at night and consider this and moving forward, it was the Jesus encounters, simply because it's rare for the church to challenge me almost in any way. In a way that's like, oh, that was good for me. Oh, that was hard. That's going to do something good for me spiritually. So I got excited about the Jesus encounters because I started, in the middle of the week thinking about it, saying, okay, I remember I shared about this, rerouting myself so I could hit someone again with the Jesus encounter and different things like that. And I thought, gosh, this is really good for me. I'd like to be a part of that. For Anju, it was, gosh, I really like their vision, helping other churches that are struggling and helping other churches. That might be something we should be a part of. So those are the things that attracted us and really made us say yes. When it's a year ago almost exactly that we came out here, we were like, I don't know. I don't know. And as we're tuning in, more of the Jesus encounters for me and her coming here and thinking about the vision, that kind of solidified it. Ethan, what do you got?
My dad forgot something. He also forgot about the money.
Thanks. Grab me out with the yes. Yeah. I have no clever response to that.
Don't tell that guy a secret. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Hey guys, Steve just reminded me of the thing too before we close. We're in this to help people, folks. We're not in this to just build our own golden calf and hang out and have our own king. We're in this to help people put on the whole spiritual armor and stand. And if the Lord allows, to do more than standing. So think that the providence of the Lord, those things, if indeed He's allowing us to experience those, are not for our own good. They're for His good. And that's why we need to be ready to be put to work, guys.
And you know what? There's something that a couple weeks ago, Steve used a term, phrase, if you will, that I thought was very, very pointed when it came to situation. And I won't recall the situation exactly, but the phrase he used was a real faith stretcher. About the house, about the job, about all, and when it comes down to it, I'm sorry?
Moving here.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And the whole thing was, isn't that kind of like what happened when, well, this guy is up on the mountain, we don't know whether he's alive or dead. Their faith is getting stretched. When they were being stretched in a manner that we have begun to experience, I think maybe as we begin to act upon faith rather than the world's approach, I'll just go ahead and reason it out and we give you a nice, okay. We need to probably act more on our faith, not our heart. Our deceitful and desperately wicked, but on the faith that God's determined is going to be that which would conquer the gates of heaven.
Well said.
On this, I wanted to say something about actually, that's some of things also I never thought about. Because if I cannot speak well, so it doesn't work, And so because of that, I was thinking about like it came to sleep for me. And then like Steve was telling me like, oh, the interview, this day. Okay, we need it quick, because we wanted to answer here quick. And so he said, okay, go tomorrow, go interview. Like, how can I cannot, for me, it's like starting for me is very hard for people to communicate, not talk. And then for me, it's like, it's really hard. I cannot do it tomorrow. How can I do interview tomorrow? I don't prepare. I don't know what to say, all those things. And then even the barista, I need to say things. Like I need to know what I am going to know. And Gina and Jerry pray for me. So, and then we have a prayer on Tuesday, and then Wednesday I have an interview. I told them, and they prayed for me. And I was like, oh my goodness, oh no. If I fail, what happened? Like, I got scared. I was like, no, I was trying to say, one day I couldn't do it. Why did you do that? No, we did quick. But I'm saying, in the same time, went there and I said, Lord, okay, this is you.
Amen.
If this is your will. If you want me to get this job, I get it. If I don't get it also, I'm fine. But I wanted to trust you. I wanted to do that. I would go. I trust you. And then when I said that, it's like up to me, and then it's up to God. So, and I was like praying and then just sitting there and just relaxing and just asking God to help me. And then because of that, I'm doing that. And that same day I got a job. It was a blessing and it was not me. So, like this encounter also for me is like in the beginning I was like, for me also, I don't like I like to talk with people, but few sentences I don't know how to. After that, I don't know how to make say things. But in the beginning, it was very hard for me also to Jesus encounter, sharing in
English.
In English actually, and so. But as I do it, like now, okay, I need to do the Jesus encounter. I need to care about these people the same time, and that's really helping me. Not like reaching very end, but I'm in a step. So I just wanted to say to all of you, thank you so much for praying, and thank you for helping me also actually grow my faith. So.
One thing missing why we needed this job is they didn't want to rent this place to us because our income level was like 1,000 or 2,000 short for the year. It was kind of dumb, I thought. So she said, if she gets anything, any type of job, anything, doesn't matter, McDonald's, anything, that would put you over, And I wasn't even sure if what they were challenging us with was legal. Okay. But if you want to lose a place, challenge them on legality.
Especially in this market, right?
Yeah. So I was convinced, I was going to say we, but I was convinced this is where God wanted us at this place. And it was a pain in the butt to make it happen. I didn't make it happen, but there was definitely God doing it, but it was leaning into it and encountering an obstacle to such an extent that apart from God, to be like, well, obviously God doesn't want you to be at this place, So I'm sharing that just to say that if God is leading us somewhere, it is normal to experience opposition, and we may have to push into some things, whether it's renting at this place or whatever else. It's dangerous to interpret God's will based upon circumstances. I'm not completely against it, but it can be dangerous to do so.
This was, in my opinion, and what Anya just said, it is what we are talking about. We say prayerfully dependent.
Yeah.
And we need to be even more so than that. We need to be asking God, seeking God's guidance, and I say we, myself included, we need to do something different than what Joshua did with the Gibeonites, or with what he did with AI, or, on and on it goes. We need to be seeking God's direction. And by the way, I'm gonna have to probably change the pronunciation of AI because AI is not, it's not the artificial intelligence, but it's still something we need to probably be concerned about.
Yeah.
Probably
And you touched on another thing that made me think when we have this, I have this idea, I think it's in the culture. Oh, we're doing God's will, we're moving toward his purposes, and I'm going to experience this very tranquil, peaceful feeling. And good, everyone's experienced this. Pain in the butt.
Yeah.
That tranquility maybe we might experience on the other side of it.
When we're dead.
Briefly. But then it's on the other thing. It's like, it's a pain. Obedience isn't, it's a weird thing. There's a joy in it. There is that, but it's a pain at the same time. If you know, you know.
I'm excited about how God's moving, and my past history, if I will, my past indicates to me, because of the past of the school I went to, that any obstacle that Satan tries to put in front of us, God will easily overcome. But we got to have faith in his doing that. And number two, even if we get to this space we're talking about, God can show himself mighty in a lot of different ways when it comes to not just this space, but who knows, we may end up buying an entire complex and getting it rezoned or whatever. Because God is able, and we need to understand that we have a great God.
So you're anticipating an awesome future history.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And the one other thing that I thought about Steve J. Earlier this week when I happened upon a video. It was way too long for me to suggest that he share it, because this guy, I don't remember, fight, the Mike guy. He's like 26, he tells me. He said in the video. And he talks about 3 things about the reason that this church is a false church, kind of thing. He might have seen it. And one of the things that I thought was very, very key was the fact that he points out things that we might have on the surface said, yeah, that's okay. At the same time, it reminded me that they don't even believe what they said they believe, because they said that everybody is someone to be welcomed and loved. But he goes to this church and challenges their spiritual standing and their devotion and their direction, and they don't. Yeah, he's not welcome, he's not loved, and that kind of thing. But you come in with a alternate lifestyle, they want to welcome you. So
They want to or they don't?
they do want to. That alphabet soup, they're ready for you to come on in.
Which is half good.
Yeah, but at the same time, their whole identity as far as the Word of God, and anyway, it's a whole
worship and welcome.
Yeah. Anyway, it was one of those things that really kind of I thought about it, and maybe there's a condensed version someplace. Anyway, I got to thinking about Jay over there, and it was like, it's one of those things where we need to be more prayerfully dependent and listening to God and understanding that he is able to conquer, and not necessarily look for God to, or man especially, to hand out to us. So
The other thing we need to look at is our past. What culpability do we have in how we landed here throughout the years? I mean, if you don't learn from our mistakes, right, we won't move forward. And again, I think it's really a heart condition.
and this is one of
We
the
still
things.
got work to do. I just feel it in my bones that we still have work to do.
Yeah.
We're not really ready to launch. And I feel like we're still in that desert spot and we're roaming around for the 40 years. But, until we do the work,
It'll still be running.
Yeah.
Preston, are you laughing?
And one of the things that Preston was saying with regard to, I got kicked out of church because I'm teaching the Old Testament. The reason he says that is because we need to remember the things that he's chronicled. We need to remember, and this is what he said over and over again, the landmarks that were put up by the Israelites, the things that have been chronicled was because they had a short memory.
That's true.
And that's what
What did you have for dinner 2 days ago?
2 days ago.
No clue.
And that's probably my age, doesn't matter.
Oh, well, we're so normal.
So, folks, I very much miss worshiping with you guys in person because there's a wonderful synergy and connectivity when you're in the room with folks and folks are embracing truth and then looking to walk in a path that then really honors Yahweh God, because there was resonance in terms of what the interaction was. Diane brought up a point, guys, and she didn't really say this directly, and I didn't teach on it today, but it's inherent in what Diane just mentioned, remembering where we've come from. If you read Diane's treatise when she went to visit the church that she did a couple weeks back, one of the things that Diane is keenly aware of, maybe differently than anybody in the room there, is excitement, zeal, exuberance. Guys, one of the things I didn't talk about today was when the Israelites got it right. They were figuratively on fire for the Lord Yahweh, for Adonai. And one of the things that is sorely missing in our crew right now is just that unbridled sense of joy. Whether it's enjoying Steve's apologetics, whether it's praying together, whether it's the music selections or the music participation or Steve's teaching/sermons. We're not bringing a joy to the table yet, folks. That's contagious, infectious, in a positive way that says, man, where does that generate? Where do they get that from? And I like a piece of that. So please don't be surprised if that winds up being a teaching if we indeed transition to something other than Steve's house. Okay, so I had asked Steve to pray for us. Let me pray for us, and then let's move on to the next thing. Guys, thank you. Appreciate your indulgence today. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for the discussion. Unfortunately, that's my style, is interaction, because if I tell you a thing, it's real easy for you to nod and agree. But if you come up with it, it makes it maybe easier for, number one, for you to avoid, and then when I call you or remind you about it later, you can't say you never heard it.